Welcome to a Wizard's Toolkit demonstration of the Data Browse box. This video will show off all the basic features like header sorting, column alignment, and exporting. While other data grid libraries often use caching, we never do that with the Wizard's Toolkit because data can change at any second. So every sort or page navigation is pulling current data from the database. Let's get started. In this video, we're going to go over the Browse box basic features from the Wizard's Toolkit. Notice it never uses cache, it always pulls data from the database. The wtkBuildDataBrowse function is 708 lines of code and is part of a 1500 lines browse function set in PHP. Here are the parameters, which I will go over in more detail during this video. And these are the different features we're going to cover that are all part of the basic, which is what you'll need 97% of the time. In a separate video, I'll go over the advanced browse box features, which also call the same function but pass in additional parameters and special methods. All right, let's get started. First off, here is the bare minimum browse. And notice at the bottom is the page navigation, which will navigate through the data. As I said, this is not caching the data. This is actually 11,000 rows of fake user data. And you can jump to the end, you can jump to the beginning, and it's lightning fast, which is mostly because of bare minimum retrieved and good indexes on the SQL database. All right, now let's see. This is all the code that's necessary to make that page work. Just a select statement and this one line. Now, if we change to this line, then it's going to pass in a different HTML template to use, which will make it look a little better. So in this template, it just has a nice little box around it. The page navigation still works the same way. And if we look at the HTML, you can see that the table, it's all in a table. And there's not much formatting because it's all handled through your CSS file, which comes with the Wizard's Toolkit. It makes it look nice. And then there's the JavaScript functions that allow for page navigation. All right, let's look at it. This is all coming from the Wizard's Toolkit demos, which comes with the download of Wizard's Toolkit. And here is a slightly more advanced version. Again, it's got the page navigation. It's got export buttons. You click that, it opens up in another page, and all it's really doing is it's passing in mode equals export. And this will open up in any spreadsheet, whether you're using Excel, numbers, whatever. Here the file is open up in numbers, my spreadsheet on Mac. And of course, if you do the XML, it generates an XML file, which is pretty basic. But there's your full XML file. Now let's look at what is the PHP that generated that file. List custom HTML.php. Again, we just have a select statement, which is using your standard SQL. And then we added these two variables, gloShowExport, which created this button, or allowed this button to show, and gloShowExportXML. By putting those to true, it added these buttons. And we have the demo MPA page, which I created here, and I gave it the green style and dark background, dark theme. And you can check out our video on CSS styles to understand how you can easily customize your own look and feel and color theme for Wizard's Toolkit. And here you see my super demo, and here is the header buttons. It's in a commented out token so that if you forget to replace it or show export buttons, it will not show on the page, but if you have the PHP gloShow export equals true, then it will show. So if we said we don't want to do XML, refresh, the XML button disappears. So that's how quick and easy it is to add export buttons. All right, we covered this. We covered this. I'm going to go over the PDO filtering feature in a separate video when I cover SQL, PDO, regarding Wizards Toolkit and some other special functions to make working with multiple databases within Wizards Toolkit very easy. All right, let's look at set page size and skipping of the footer. All right, we'll go back to here to the list data minimum, and there's two more global variables. All global variables in Wizards Toolkit start with $GLO. That way you know this is a global variable that will be used by multiple pages. Variables that are used only on the current page that you're at use $PG. And variables that are in a function all start with $FNC. That way when you're deep into function code, you know, oh, this is a global variable, this is a function variable, and there's no question about, you know, where is this variable defined. All right, back to, I'm going to add a skip footer and add gloRows page. This will change the number of rows on a page. So let's go back to here. We'll say there's a bare minimum, and now it's 15. And there's no footer. Now it's 3 and there's no footer. And if we wanted to say, okay, let's put the footer back. Now we can page navigate 4 at a time through the database. Why would you ever not want to have a footer? Well, if you know that there's only 5 on a browse list, then why have 1 out of 5 and no page navigation? You might just want to hide that footer. In fact, let's look at the 3 lists on the same page. Here's where I do like the top 5 logins. In there I have a totaling, in which case there's no need to have a footer. All right, we covered skip footer and the set page size. Super easy. Now let's go to column alignment. We try to have a demo for everything, even if it's super simple. So here is our list with sorts and alignments. Here you see the URL up the top is demo list sort aligns.php, and here's our page. I can sort a column just by clicking on it, and if you click on it a second time, it goes from ascending to descending. Here is the sorting of a date column. And you can see our session durations is right justified. Our pages visited is centered. Now let's look at this page. List sort aligns. Right here. Okay, the column alignment is handled in this array. We go gloTotalArray, and you can see pages visited, center, time diff, right, session duration, center. All right, so I'm going to I want to change that. And now if we go like this, session duration is centered instead of right aligned. Now let's see why it's showing time diff and session duration. I should really get rid of one of these because down here under the header sort, we say for the time diff column, change the viewed name as session duration. So we don't need that. As part of a different demo. So here is the SQL And I'm doing something a little bit trickier up here. I'm saying if the global database driver has Postgres in it, then let's do the formatting of the user's first and last name in PostgreSQL's syntax. Otherwise assume that it's MySQL and use that syntax for formatting of the first and last name. And I have a PHP function that does the same sort of thing for date formatting. As I said, I'll go into that in more detail in a separate video, but basically here's the PHP function that says if the database driver is MySQL, use this date format syntax, otherwise PostgreSQL, use this date format syntax. And of course you have access to this PHP, so you can add additional SQL database syntaxes if you need to. So here we have the column array, and here we can say, let's make this, of course, left is always going to be the default, but it's that easy to change this to right or center. Now header sorts. This is a little more exciting. The header sort capability, you go, the first parameter is the column name. Now, if we go up here, here is the pages visited. Okay, it's bringing that in. And our standard with Wizard's Toolkit is if you don't specify it, then what it will use is it will use a column name, but it will insert spaces based on word caps or underscores. So it changes this to this with a space between the pages and the visited. If you do declare a second parameter, you can change your column name. So here I have time diff, and I'm saying, but people aren't going to understand that as well as session duration, so let's display session duration. And now here's the third method of calling the header sort. As you're probably aware, if you do a sort on a date that you have formatted, it's not going to work very well. So here we have 516. Let's sort this, and now it's sorting very nicely because it's using the actual date. It's using the first login field. I'm leaving this out, but I could say my date, and that changes the column to say my date, and it's using the first login. And if we had this using a different date format like MAY for May and MAR for March and APR for April, then your normal date formatting or date sorting would not work very well because it would be alphabetic. April would come before March or May. By doing it this way, it works. If we look at the HTML, we see in here it's passing in parameters automatically regarding how to do the date sorting. And when it comes back, it will change it to ascending or descending, like this one is in descending. And that's all handled for you automatically. We don't have to put any special code in the PHP. That's all handled in the 700 plus lines of PHP in the browse box function. So there's your column alignment. We've already gone over page navigation and the sortable headers. Now let's look at adding a button and for add, edit, and delete. All right, here we have an edit button, an add button, and a delete button, and then also a modal button. Let's look at this demo. There's a really cool little SQL function that we provide that changes your parameters of your email, phone, latitude, longitude, and this says whether or not you want to show the phone number in addition to having a quick link to it. I mentioned that in another video, but basically if you click on that, it will show you where the latitude longitude is in Google Maps. If I click this, it would send an email to the email associated with the Yoda pet. And if I click this, it would call this phone number using Skype or whatever VoIP the person might have associated on their computer. But this is supposed to be about the add, edit, and delete button. So to get the buttons to show up, you just assign what page you want it to go to these variables. So for the edit page, I want it to go to pet edit in the demo folder. I don't have to put on a .php, that's assumed. The JavaScript will actually append the .php when it navigates to the page. The add page, well, usually you want it to be the same as the edit page, in which case I just assign it that way. The delete page is actually something very special. We'll get to that in a moment. All right, so if we go to the edit page, we see here's all the information. And by the way, I have a demo that discusses how this page was made. I have a video that discusses how this page was made. And the add page goes to actually the same PHP page, but sets it up ready for add. Let's look at the JavaScript created using this method. Since this is using our single page application navigation, and we see that up here we have the add button or the edit button. Okay, so up here we see here is the add button, and for the second parameter is passing add. And here is an edit button, and the second parameter is passing the ID of the row. That's going to be their primary key so that it can then call the data. Now if we look at the select statement, we're passing in, of course, the primary key, which is UID in this case. It could easily be ID or whatever you're using for your values. Wizard's Toolkit expects the primary key to be UID. So if you want the edit button to automatically pass that value and you have a different ID naming convention, then you need to go like this so that it will, in the Wizard's Toolkit, both suppress the column, because you see we don't see the UID for Yoda. We could. So if I wanted to show that, I could do that. And now it shows the ID of my values. But generally you don't want users to see what your ID is of your primary key in a data table. So if you did have a ID that wasn't named UID, you would do that as a ID as, you would alias it, and then it would suppress it and pass it to your edit field, delete field, edit button, delete button, and add button. All right, let's go back to this. Okay, let's look at the delete button. Here you see we have the edit button here, the delete button, and then we have the modal button. Why do we have a modal button? Because of this more buttons feature. We'll go into that in more detail in a moment. For the delete button, it's actually just calling a special JavaScript function called wtkDel. It's passing in the table name, the UID, and Y, and SPA. SPA lets it know that this is a single page application, and Y lets it know that this table has a del date column, and the del date column allows it to delete by setting a del date or a deletion date. Now notice in this table we currently don't have any. Now I'm going to say we're going to delete bunners. Now what just happened, first off we'll look at the data. And you see now bunners has a del date. And now we know this is when this data row was requested to be deleted by a user. So now we won't show it anymore. And if we leave this page and we come back to it, it does not show because in the select statement, we of course say where del date is null. All right, in the JavaScript, to make it blazing fast, what it actually does is it uses Ajax to call a page to set the del date, passing in the parameters properly, and it then hides the column or the table row in the HTML. By hiding it, it doesn't require refreshing the screen and re-pulling all of the data because it knows the rest of the data hasn't changed. You've only deleted a row, so it just hides it. So if we say, let's look at this. You'll notice that each of these TRs for table row has an ID value, and it is using the static letter D, the name of the table, and then the ID value or the UID value of the data row. And when you hit the delete button, it then assigns a class of hide it, and it hides that row instead of refreshing the page. So it is extremely fast, instantaneous. All right, we've gone over the add, delete, and edit buttons. Now let's look at more buttons feature. Listing with more buttons. All right. So if we look at the console, it just opened up the contact list page. So now let's look in the demo folder for our contact list. Here's the select. Here's some filtering capability, which we see up here. I currently having it filtered by Brenda. I can say show me all. But now let's filter by Brenda. Here we have our header sorts, and you can see that they are color-coded, which helps indicate that these are clickable and sortable. Last name, first name, city. We have our skip footer, edit page. Skip footer I did as a demo, we'll remove that. Our del page. If you add at the end of the del page here, all you have to do is you pass in the table name, and if it is a del date situation, then you append to it del date. If it's not a del date situation, you don't, and it actually deletes the row. Something important to know. And here's my glow more buttons, which of course is an array, and you pass in the different information. The act is the action or the page that you will go to. The img is the image, and that's in Materialize CSS, their icons page. So here you can look at all the different icons available and choose which one you want. If I wanted to change this to alarm, I could do that. And now watch these. I just changed that to alarm. We'll change it back. And the PHP and the JavaScript know to append at the end the .php. So you don't have to put in user logins.php, you just put in user logins, and that will be added in the JavaScript. All right, and that's as easy as it is. You say which page you want to go to, and note they don't even have to be in the same folder. If you want to go to a different folder on your web server, you just pre-pinned the folder that you want to go to, and then the file name, and it will go there. So let's see it in action. I like Brenda because she's got some good data in there. This is the login for Brenda, and there's all of her information. And this is again using Brenda. It's passing in the UID as it calls these other pages, which is what you want it to do when you are showing additional buttons associated with this row of data. Now notice this didn't go to a separate page, it called a modal window. And that's because down here I said for the contact modal, which we see is right here for the contact info, let's change it from an Ajax Go to a WTK modal call. All the other parameters are the same. I said only do it for contact modal, don't do it for all the buttons, because the other buttons would look horrible if they were in a little tiny modal, or the other pages would look bad. I did it before and after. Before as a search and replace, and after as a replace in the HTML. Let me explain why. For the first, we're going to reset list. When you do a header sort or a page navigation, what it is actually doing, let me clear this. We'll do a page navigation. It is passing this information through your JavaScript for the page navigation. It's saying which page index to go to, what's the table ID, what's the order by sort, are you in ascending or descending, and is this an Ajax call? because it knows it's an AJAX call, the PHP function here says don't finish the rest of the page, don't go to merge and bring back everything in this mini box HTML, just return the bare minimum browse box of data and put it in place of the previous browse box of data. That's what this AJAX functionality does. And it says start at this page index using this order by for this table ID. The API key is part of the login methodology to prevent anybody from accessing it unless they have a valid login. So the reason we have this is because when this is called, if AJAX equals Y is passed, it never gets down to here. It returns the information which fills your page for just the browse box, but it doesn't replace this. It doesn't replace your quick filter. It doesn't replace your menu structure. It doesn't replace anything that's unnecessary. It only replaces the bare minimum of your browse box, which makes it lightning fast. However, if this is the original call to the page, then that's not the case. It will go through here and then it will go to the next line. And on the next line, we definitely want to say, hey, we want the AJAX Go to be changed to WTK modal and exit. Now, if you're doing a multi-page application instead of a single page, you don't need this because the same search and replace functionality is done in WTK merge page, which is used by multi-page applications. All right, remember up here, the last parameter in wtkBuildDataBrowse is whether you want to be modal edit. Now, it defaults to no. I'm going to change it to yes. When I change the sort order, it is updating the whole browse box, which includes the edit buttons. So now this pops in a modal window instead of as a separate window. So again, if I change this back, now it goes to a separate window using AJAX Go instead of the WTK modal. Note, if I change it to yes, then all of these are going to be modals as well. Everything in the More button. Now, there is a special capability though. If you want the Edit button to go to AJAX Go and the Modal button or the More buttons to go, then you can say P for partial, and that will make it so only the More buttons will open up in a modal. So let's go back here. We're going to say More buttons, and now the Edit button goes here as usual. But all the other buttons are going to be in modal windows. So that's how More buttons work. Now for the gloTotalArray, and then we'll do the multiple browses on a single page. All right, on this page we have list sort lines, we have totals down here. If we look at our list sort lines, this is all you need to do to create totals. You choose the column name. We're looking at pages visited. You put the column name here, and then you put sum if we wanted to, and then it will sum all the values on this page. Now note, it's not summing all of them in the 52 rows, it's summing all the ones on this page. Now, if I change this to dsum, that stands for $sum, then it will do it as a currency value, 573, using the US currency format, which of course you can edit and change in your own environment. Now let's look at 3 lists on the same page. And this is really very, very easy with Wizard's Toolkit. So you see it's list 3 demo. I'm going to make this a little bit larger. That's the whole thing. It's just 93 lines of code, and it's fairly intuitive. Up here we're saying let's look at the login log section. Here we're doing the column alignments. Here we're doing the total array. Here we're doing the header sorts. We're saying skip the footer and only show the top 5 because we're doing down here top 5 login logs. In the pet notes section, again, we're just doing a select statement, header sorts, changing the column alignments for which columns we care to have aligned, and then we're calling this and we're setting the number of rows per page we want to see. That's why we're seeing these 5. And then same. And now the key thing though for having multiple browse boxes on a single page is this third parameter. It's critical when you have multiple on the same page because it's going to call this page list 3 demo to refresh it if you're doing page navigation. So let's see. All right. Here I'm clearing the more buttons so it doesn't have the more buttons on this browse. And then at the bottom I'm saying show the 3 lists. The sorting works great. One thing to note, the third parameter is the table ID. That is assigned to the actual HTML table that we're looking at. So if we look in here for table, we'll see pet list, lookup list, WTK login log. All right, that is really important so that when we're doing the sorting, it doesn't pull the information back for all 3. The browse box PHP says, oh, this is an AJAX call. What's the table ID? The table ID is not a match for what I'm trying to do right now, so return nothing. It doesn't do the SQL, it doesn't call the database, it does nothing, and it goes to the next one. So when I'm doing this, so let's do one of these. So let's go like this. It calls the list demo. It passes the parameters, including the table ID, the order by request, the sort, and the AJAX. And so This is only returning this little bit of code. It's not doing all three of the list requests. It's only returning one. Here's your table. And thus it's only refreshing this one section. So it's blazing fast. And then if I go down here and I say, let's sort this one, it just did the same call to the same page, but by passing different parameters, namely the table ID lookup list and the different order by and sort by, it is only retrieving the lookup list. So again, blazing fast. With page navigation, and in the page navigation you can see it's doing the wtkBrowse box and it's passing in the lookup list, which is the table ID and the sort order request and the page index. In the advanced tutorial, I'll go over exactly how the SQL works with limits and offsets. But the beauty of Wizard's Toolkit is you don't have to be an expert when it comes to doing SQL. You can rely on Wizard's Toolkit to do the majority of the hard lifting for you. So that shows you the total array and the multiple browses on a single page. If you have questions, add them in the comments below. Subscribe for more on the business of programming.